Before we begin, a small clarification. I have recorded the performances of Couperin Pavanne on the harpsichord. However, I am going to use the spinet for this introduction simply because it is tuned to quarter comma meantone and I need that temperament for demonstration. So, this video is devoted to the Pavanne in F sharp minor by Couperin. It is the third video I have devoted to this piece, and I will post links to the two previous videos in the video description. There are two main reasons for this remake. The first reason is interpretive and primarily concerns the way I approach some of the 16th note passages. The second reason has to do with the choice of temperament. In the two previous videos, I used quarter comma meantone, and as I will explain later, this can seem a very extreme choice. However, I have always thought that Couperin may very well have had in mind precisely this temperament, or at least something very close to it, in order to create a uniquely poignant and heart-wrenching expressive universe. So I would like to discuss why I think Couperin may have had quarter comma meantone in mind, although please keep in mind that this simply reflects my own understanding. But I also wanted to give you a chance to listen to a milder alternative, so I have decided to make two recordings for this video, one in quarter comma meantone and one in Rameau temperament. Let's start with the interpretive issue. As I have mentioned in several previous videos, Baroque scores are not meant to be interpreted literally, especially when it comes to rhythmic values. To express it in somewhat simplified terms, if we have a group of 16th notes, it is very likely that they're not all going to be of equal value or equal duration. It all depends on the context and where they fall within the metric hierarchy of a measure. For instance, a 16th note that falls on the beat is more important and therefore can have a slightly longer duration than the 16th notes that follow. Something similar could also be applied in terms of articulation, where the first 16th note could be held over while the second 16th note is being played, creating the effect of over legato, while the remaining 16th notes could be progressively more detached. Such rhythmic and articulating inflections can also be applied to individual motives or gestures, meaning that the final result is a much more flexible realization than what the rhythmic notation on the score suggests. However, I'm not entirely convinced with the way I rendered some of the 16th note figurations in my previous performances. Let's take as an example the first such figuration we find in the Pavanne. And what I have in mind, let me start the piece. And here now, so those are the 16th notes. And what I want to do is I want to play them in three different ways. I'm going to first play them literally, in other words, exactly like 16th notes. Then I'm going to play them with a little more urgency. And then for the final performance, I'm going to play them significantly faster than 16th notes. Now with a little more urgency. And finally, even faster. probably noticed that the third time I played it, the 16th notes were more like 32nd notes, although admittedly I exaggerated a bit in order to make the difference between the three versions easily perceptible. The problem that arises when playing the 16th notes in a way that they resemble 32nd notes is that this piece also contains 4-note gestures written as 32nd notes, and therefore the distinction between the two different rhythmic values is lost. This is precisely what I hear in my previous recordings, a little more than I would like, and I feel that the rhythmic variety present in the notation is minimized. So in this recording, my aim was to opt for an approach that resembles the second version I played, where 16th notes can still have an urgency and also be performed slightly faster where appropriate, but are still kept distinct from 32nd note figurations. And now onto the choice of temperament. I will begin by looking at the tonality of F sharp minor within the context of Couperin's works and the context of his time. Then I will discuss the challenges posed by using quarter comma meantone. And finally, I will explain why I think that Couperin may have had quarter comma meantone in mind. The Pavanne occupies a solitary place in the works of Couperin, as it is the only piece written in the key of F sharp minor. In terms of harpsichord repertory, I can't think of another piece in F sharp minor written in France during the 17th century. The next instance is the suite in F sharp minor by Gaspard Leroux, published in his Pièce de clavecin in 1705, followed by the 26th Ordre of François Couperin, published in 1730. However, F sharp minor does appear in the lute repertory of 17th century France. Now, I am certainly not an expert when it comes to tuning the lute. However, let me offer a few general remarks, and if any lutenists are watching this video, please let me know if anything I say is not entirely correct. It is important to keep in mind that while the lute is a fretted instrument, it has movable frets, meaning that it is possible to tune in different unequal temperaments. However, my understanding is that it can be quite tricky to tune in quarter comma meantone, so most likely there could have been a variety of different tunings ranging from 6th comma meantone to even equal temperament. There was also the possibility to tweak a temperament so that it would favor a particular tonality. Having said all that, it is noteworthy that the tonality of F sharp minor was referred to as le ton de la chèvre, chèvre means goat, which definitely does not evoke pleasant associations. Indeed, the majority of the pieces in F sharp minor I've listened to by composers such as Jacques Gallo and Charles Mouton sound, to me at least, quite dark and somber. And two composers, namely Jacques Gallo and Jacques de Saint-Luc, wrote Tombeau in F sharp minor. It is also noteworthy that the 17th and 18th century French treatises I know that discuss key characteristics, in other words, the expressive affect associated with particular tonalities, do not mention F sharp minor at all, although I should note that these treatises also leave out most tonalities containing several sharps or flats, and the tonalities they do include do not stray far from what standard quarter comma meantone can handle. As a matter of fact, I know of only two theorists that mention F sharp minor, both from Germany and both from the 18th century, and therefore not necessarily relevant to mid-17th century French repertory, especially as we would probably be dealing with different types of an equal temperament. But in case you're curious, both theorists concur that F sharp minor is not the most pleasant of keys. Johann Mattheson, writing in 1713, states that, quote, "Although it leads to great distress, F sharp minor nevertheless is more languid and lovesick than lethal. Moreover, it has something abandoned, singular, and misanthropic about it." End quote. Christian Friedrich Daniel Schubert, writing in 1784, calls it a gloomy key, adding that, quote, "It tugs at passion as a dog biting a dress. Resentment and discontent are its language. It really does not seem to like its own position. Therefore, it languishes ever for the calm of A major or for the triumphant happiness of D major." Let me now explain why the key of F sharp minor arguably goes beyond the capabilities of quarter comma meantone. Since I've discussed the characteristics of quarter comma meantone in a previous video, I'll put a link to that video in the video description. Here, I will briefly cover the basics. Quarter comma meantone has 8 pure major thirds. Because of this, the remaining 4 major thirds are very wide, since in reality they are diminished fourths, and the fifth between A flat and E flat is painfully wide, since in reality it is a diminished sixth between G sharp and E flat. This is the so-called wolf fifth. So here is your G sharp and your E flat. Semitones are not equidistant, meaning that chromatic passages can sound very deliciously flavorful. It is also important to keep in mind that in quarter comma meantone there are no enharmonics. Each accidental key has only one function, and in the most standard configuration, what we have is this: C sharp, E flat, F sharp, G sharp, and B flat. This explains why we have a diminished sixth between G sharp and E flat, or a diminished fourth between, for instance, C sharp and F. So this is also pretty wide. Now, since F sharp minor has a key signature of 3 sharps, and more specifically the exact 3 sharps we have in quarter comma meantone, namely F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp, it should be playable. But we have a problem when it comes to the second most important chord after the tonic, namely the dominant, which in F sharp minor is formed on the note C sharp. If we were to build the dominant based on the natural form of the minor scale, then there is no problem, because we get a minor dominant chord consisting of C sharp, E natural, and G sharp. However, we tend to use the major form of the dominant from the harmonic minor, which means that the E natural becomes an E sharp. The reason being that when the leading tone is half a step away from the tonic, it creates more tension and more of a gravitational pull towards the tonic. If we have an E sharp, we really want to go back to the note F sharp. Whereas if we have an E natural, it doesn't have the same pull. You could almost say that this almost wants to go the other direction. And the problem is that C sharp to F is one of those 4 very wide major thirds of quarter comma meantone. As I mentioned previously, what we really have is a diminished fourth between C sharp and F. And there's no E sharp in quarter comma meantone. So this is what a C sharp major chord sounds like. In other words, it's not particularly pleasant. Since the dominant chord is so important in tonal music, the key of F sharp minor is pretty much off limits in quarter comma meantone. However, as I have mentioned in previous videos, 17th century composers who were familiar with the characteristics of quarter comma meantone could venture into these no-go harmonic areas for expressive purposes, especially if what they wished to express was not necessarily something pleasant. In this regard, it is important to keep in mind the expressive associations of a Pavanne with sadness and even despair. It is no coincidence that works such as Joan Dolan's song Flow My Tears, or Froberger's Lamentation in F minor, which I posted last month, are in the form of a Pavanne. Of course, at least the way I see it, the trick is to be able to utilize some of these unpleasant harmonic areas of quarter comma meantone without doing it in a random or excessive way, which negates any expressive potential. Let me demonstrate by contrasting Louis Couperin's Pavanne with another piece that was definitely not conceived for quarter comma meantone, the prelude in F sharp minor from the second book of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. We know for sure that what Bach had in mind was some form of circulating or well temperament, hence the title of the collection, Well-Tempered Clavier. Let's look at the score of the opening measures of that prelude. The incompatibility of Bach's harmonic thinking with the characteristics of quarter comma meantone becomes abundantly clear from the very first measures, where we not only see the frequent use of a dominant chord, but also the presence of E sharps throughout the musical lines. Let me play the opening measures of the piece and you will see what I mean. But also, as you're looking at the score, notice that here we also have other notes that don't actually belong to quarter comma meantone. So you're going to see D sharps, and of course we don't have a D sharp, we have an E flat, and therefore E sharp is not the only problem here, but I would say E sharp is really going to stick out quite a bit. And I would say especially measure 7 is really all over the place. So this thing. And then D sharp and E sharp. So clearly here Bach is expecting a proper E sharp and a proper sounding major dominant chord. And of course the fact that he also uses a lot of other pitches that are not really part of quarter comma meantone amplifies further the fact that really this piece simply does not work at all in quarter comma meantone. The harmonic contrast between this prelude and Louis Couperin's Pavanne could not be greater. Let's look now at the score of the Pavanne, and especially the first section, and see how it unfolds. The first thing that I would say you can notice is that the first few measures don't have any accidentals. In other words, you can tell immediately that when we do have the pitch E, it's a natural E, not an E sharp. And the other thing I want you to notice is how he starts with a pedal point, so that we are really not going to get anything that sounds unpleasant, at least at first. Notice here this chord is actually a minor dominant. So basically up to this point, we have not heard anything unpleasant. In other words, I think he's clearly thinking in terms of this quarter comma meantone temperament, and he's starting the piece in such a way that he is simply using the pitches that are available to him and doesn't do anything else. Now, it is important also to mention that where I stopped, immediately after that, we're going to get a D sharp. We don't actually have a D sharp in quarter comma meantone, we have an E flat. But here's where I think he is using these pitches that don't actually exist in quarter comma meantone as expressive devices, because they're not all over the place. They're very carefully placed throughout this section, but in very, very few select moments. So we get these little moments of expressive tension, but then immediately we go back to something that sounds okay. So these tiny little moments stick out expressively, but they do not overwhelm the piece as we saw with the Bach example. So if I continue from where I left off, let me start at the beginning of measure 4. Here's our D sharp. But notice then immediately we go back to a minor dominant. So this is what I hope that you can see here, that these no-go harmonic areas occur only at very select moments and do not occur everywhere, like we saw with the Bach. Now, I don't want to play the entire first section, but I just want to highlight a couple more moments here, because what I think Louis Couperin is doing, and what I hope you can hear during the performance of the piece, is that he's building this harmonic tension by introducing some of these pitches that don't exist in quarter comma meantone. He's doing it gradually, but in shorter intervals. So what I would say is that the highlight, the expressive highlight of this piece, happens very, very close to the end of the section, and specifically with the E sharp that we see in measure 16. Let me approach it. We are looking at the 5th line. I'm going to start the 5th line in measure 14, and I'm going to go all the way to the beginning of measure 17. There we go, there's your E sharp. And then if we continue, what is happening here is that in measure 16, we are introduced to the most biting dissonance, I would say, that we have heard up to that moment. In other words, this one. And then after a short relaxation, he chooses to conclude the piece with a proper major dominant chord, so that the very final chord of the measure is perhaps the one that has the most powerful expressive impact. And to me, at least, when I play this piece and I see how he has actually included some of these pitches within the texture, to me it seems deliberate. It seems that he has really done this on purpose, and that he clearly thought out how he could use this temperament, quarter comma meantone, as an expressive device. It's a very, very different way of thinking from the Bach prelude that I played for you. So to me, this is deliberate. This is why I think he may have had quarter comma meantone in mind. I hope I have managed to clarify why I think Louis Couperin may have had quarter comma meantone in mind for this Pavanne. However, since, as I mentioned at the beginning of this introduction, this is simply my understanding of this, and I have no way of really knowing whether this is really what Louis Couperin had in mind, what I have decided to do for this video is to record the piece twice and thus give you an option to listen to what I think he may have had in mind, which is a version with quarter comma meantone, and then to present you with a milder alternative, which is the Rameau temperament that I tend to use for most of my videos. Now, it is important to mention here that the Rameau temperament, just like quarter comma meantone, is not a circulating temperament. In other words, you cannot play in every single tonality. However, since it is a milder version of quarter comma meantone, because it retains 4 of the 8 pure major thirds and does away with the wolf, what this means is that it allows us to play in more tonalities. Now, F sharp minor is still very much pushing the limits of what it can do. However, I think that it is still within its limits. So what you're going to find is that the dominant chord of C sharp major will still have a certain poignant quality, because C sharp major doesn't sound particularly pleasant, but I would say it is within the realms of what we would accept as playable. So you're going to get this push, you're going to get this tension with the Rameau temperament. However, it's not going to be as extreme as quarter comma meantone. So in this way, you can decide which of the two performances, or perhaps which one of the two temperaments you prefer. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the performances.
you.